All right, guys. So we've obviously been talking about how suspicious Donald Trump's handling of the Epstein files has been, right? We've seen him yell at journalists for daring to ask questions about it. We've seen him try to pressure Republican politicians into not talking about it anymore. We've even seen him call it a made-up Democratic hoax led by Obama and Clinton and Biden, a hoax that for some unexplained reason they didn't want to use in the presidential campaign against him, and also a hoax that apparently was perpetrated by his members of his cabinet right now, people like Pam Bondi and Dan Bongino and Kash Patel. Now, the obvious read into this situation as to why he won't release the files and why he's acting so panicked about this is that his name is in the files, right? Now, he would obviously deny this, but yesterday we got this report that not only is his name in the files, but that he was told about this all the way back in May. So here from the Wall Street Journal, a little bit of details on this. They say, when Justice Department officials reviewed what Attorney General Pam Bondi called a truckload of documents related to Epstein earlier this year, they discovered that Donald Trump's name appeared multiple times, according to senior administration officials. In May, Bondi and her deputy informed the president at a meeting in the White House that his name was in the Epstein files. Many other high-profile figures were also named, Trump was told, and they point out here that being mentioned in the records isn't a sign of wrongdoing. That's true. We'll circle back around to that. The officials said that it was a routine briefing that covered a number of topics and that Trump's appearance in the documents wasn't necessarily the focus of it. But they told the president at the meeting that the files contained what officials felt was unverified hearsay about many people, including Trump, who had socialized with Epstein in the past, some of the officials said. One of the officials familiar with the documents said that they contained hundreds of other names. They also told Trump that the senior Justice Department officials didn't plan to release any more documents related to the investigation of Epstein because the material could contain CP and the victim's personal information. Trump said at the meeting that he would defer to the Justice Department's decision not to release any further files. Now, a couple of things here. First off, the notion that there's no other information that you could possibly release to the American people because it would have to include CP or victims' personal information is just ridiculous. Like, that's just ridiculous, right? Nobody's asking for child abuse videos. Nobody's even asking for the victims' personal names. What we want is further details on Epstein's apparent criminal ring that he was involved in, or potential, involvement with foreign or domestic intelligence agencies, or even more information on his financials of how did he get so wealthy? Where was this money coming from? Where was this money going to, right? Was there a blackmail operation? Who was involved in that? That's the kind of thing that people want to know about. They don't want child abuse material, and they don't want victims' personal information. So this seems like a clear deflection, a comfortable excuse to say, oh, you want more information from the Epstein files? So you're saying that we release videos of children being abused? It's like, no, nobody's asking for that. So there's that part of it. And then there's also this part of it, right? Where they say, just because you're mentioned in the files doesn't necessarily mean that you engaged in criminal behavior. That's obviously true. And as I pointed out in many videos before, the connections between Trump and Epstein that I'll touch on further in this video are extensive. They're not a secret, right? We know that Donald Trump was sort of best buddies with Jeffrey Epstein for a pretty long period of time, for like a decade, right? We know the connections between Trump and Epstein. So if anybody's name was going to be plastered all over the files, it was going to be Donald Trump. That wouldn't have been shocking if you released the files and we saw his name listed there in innocuous situations, which leads me to my point as to why this makes it even more suspicious that you were told your name's in the files and then you said, I'm definitely not going to release this, right? And I'm going to go on a full-scale offensive attack against anybody who dares to ask me questions about this moving forward, right? Why would you engage in that kind of behavior unless the information, unless the instances in which your name is mentioned in these files is actually incriminating, much more so than what we know right now? So again, the suspicion levels on Donald Trump potentially being even more implicated in all of this with Epstein are increasing as more information is coming out. Now, as a reminder, this is something that he was directly asked about just earlier this month by a reporter as to whether or not Pam Bondi told him that his name was in the files, and here's what he said.
Review the findings of that review. The Attorney General briefed you on that.
What? On the
DOJ and FBI
on what?
review.
On what subject?
Epstein.
Okay.
On Epstein, of the review of the files. Attorney General Pam Bondi.
A very quick briefing.
Did she tell you? What did she tell you about the review? And specifically, did she tell you at all that your name appeared in the file?
No. She's given us just a very quick briefing, and in terms of the credibility of the different things that they've seen.
He says, no, no, no. She did not tell me that my name was in the files. Why would you lie about that? Unless there's something that you're trying to cover up. Now, we also had this angle of it here from Axios that a judge has now predictably denied Trump's request to release the Epstein transcripts. They say a U.S. judge in Florida denied on Wednesday the Trump administration's request to unseal the grand jury transcripts related to sex trafficker Jeffrey Epstein's trial. Multiple outlets reported Trump administration has faced mounting accusations that the Justice Department wasn't being transparent about the Epstein investigations, and the White House press secretary Caroline Leavitt told reporters at a press conference that she would let the president speak on this matter. Now, this was something that was predictable given the way that they went about handling this. And I think that this was yet again another instance of sort of like a deflection, like, look, oh, we're doing our best. We're trying to release more information on this. We're not going to release what we actually have in our hands right now. We're going to make this request to a judge that we know is in all likelihood going to deny that request and then throw our hands up and say, oops, sorry, we tried. Now, we continue. Just as a reminder, in terms of the extensive connections between Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein. Here we had from the Daily Beast from a while ago now. Listen to the Jeffrey Epstein tapes. Quote, I was Donald Trump's closest friend, in the words of Epstein himself. We also had this newly resurfaced clip of Jeffrey Epstein back from 2010 when he was being deposed and he was asked directly, do you have a relationship with Donald Trump? And he was also asked, have you ever socialized with Donald Trump in the presence of underaged girls? Here's what happened.
Have you ever had a personal relationship with Donald Trump?
What do you mean by personal relationships?
Have you socialized with him?
Yes, sir.
Yes?
Yes, sir.
Have you ever socialized with Donald Trump in the presence of females under the age of 18?
Though I'd like to answer that question, at least today, I'm going to have to assert my 5th, 6th, and 14th Amendment rights, sir.
He says, though I'd like to answer the question, I'm going to assert my 5th Amendment right to silence, to not speak on this matter. He was directly asked, have you ever socialized with Donald Trump in the presence of underage girls? And he had every opportunity in the world to say yes or to say no. And he says, I plead the 5th. I mean, come on, guys. Now, we continue. Further stuff that's been uncovered just in the last couple of days here from Midas Touch. They do a report on an old interview from Uncle Luke of the rap group, the 2 Live Crew. And during this interview, he talks about how in the early 1990s, he was at Donald Trump's house in Palm Beach, and he left a party when he saw people there who he thought were underaged girls. Let's go ahead and listen to a little bit of this here.
An old interview with someone who attended a Donald Trump party in the early 1990s has emerged. One of Donald Trump's celebrity friends at that time, his name is Luther Campbell. You may know him as the rap moniker Uncle Luke. He was part of the band 2 Live Crew, and he did an interview with SiriusXM about 10 years ago on a show called Make It Plain with Mark Thompson. And during this interview, Luther Campbell, aka Uncle Luke, talks about how in the early 1990s, he was at Donald Trump's house in Palm Beach, and he left this party when he saw people there who he thought were underage girls. He described the scene as looking like it was from Eyes Wide Shut with Tom Cruise and Nicole Campbell. He said he saw drug use and he had to just get out. Let's take a look at this interview. Here's Uncle Luke in his own words on Make It Plain. Let's play the clip.
If the man took us around the house, okay, he said, look, I got all these women. I got these women from the pageant. They're going to be there. So we went. It was like, hey, man, I got a pageant down here. I'm hosting these women at the house. Okay, up in Palm Beach, they sent some cars to pick us up. We get in the cars, we drive up there. Me, Mike, Eddie Murphy, we all in our own individual cars. Car service drove us up there. We got there, he showed us around the house, told us about this mansion and the history behind it and all that. Just the golf course, it was dark. We couldn't see the golf course and things like that. And then before you know it, hey, man, y'all enjoy yourself. We got cocktails and everything. And before you know it, the rooms and everything start popping. There wasn't no DJ. It was more of hey, get in where you fit in. Whatever room you're going to go in, you go into that room.
So you say no DJ. There was no music? Or the music
No,
was
there
piped
wasn't
in?
no music.
No music.
That was the interesting part about it. There wasn't no music.
So women just naked in rooms with no music.
Hey, people walk around. It was. Listen, it wasn't nothing wrong with that. I was happy to be at that party, but then at the end of the day, when I started looking at some of these girls' faces, I was like, man, these girls don't look like they're old enough. I didn't ask nobody their age, and then all the other stuff going on. You know, it was like, okay, I can't be up here. I got to go. If I'm going to jail, then somebody's going to extort me. I really, you know, I don't do drugs. Never did it in my life. You know, I smoked marijuana 2 times, you know, when I was in high school, and I didn't like the experience. As far as drugs, I may have sold drugs. I never liked the people who I sold them to when I was young because I thought they were stupid for buying it. So I never cared to indulge in it. So when I do see people doing it, if I'm around it, I get away from it.
So he says he was at a party of Donald Trump's. He saw naked girls walking around and he wanted to leave because he was so uncomfortable at the fact that they looked underage. Now, we don't know how old they were. We don't know, you know, the potential culpability of Trump in this situation, but that's his testimony of somebody who was somewhat close to Donald Trump, of somebody who was at one of these parties. And he says, these girls, at the very least, looked underaged. All right, we continue. We also have, as a reminder, some of the recent revelations that we've gotten here from CNN in the Wall Street Journal. Birthday letter to Epstein bore Trump's signature and a drawing of a naked woman. They say a collection of letters gifted to Epstein on his 50th birthday back in 2003 included a note bearing Donald Trump's name and an outline of a naked woman. The drawing, depicting a woman's breasts and a Donald signature in the place of pubic hair, surrounded several lines of typewritten text, according to the newspaper which reviewed the letter. It concluded with the line, "Happy birthday, and may every day be another wonderful secret." Be another wonderful secret. You're writing this in connection to a drawing of a naked woman where your signature is pubic hair. To the most notorious child sex trafficker in American history. Now, again, none of this is definitive to say Donald Trump is a child abuser or anything like that, but doesn't look too good, does it? Doesn't look too good. We also had this here again from CNN exclusive. Newly discovered photos and a video shed fresh light on Trump's ties to Jeffrey Epstein. We have new pictures and videos of Epstein both attending Trump's 1993 wedding, as well as Epstein and Donald Trump in footage from a 1999 Victoria's Secret fashion event in New York that shows Trump and Epstein laughing and chatting together ahead of the runway event. We, of course, also know that Donald Trump is reported to have gone into the changing rooms without permission, obviously, at some of these events that he would run. Just total creep behavior. Obviously, we also had the grab him by the pussy situation. Like, Donald Trump is a sexual creep at the very bare minimum, and a sexual abuser, and somebody who was found to have raped E. Jean Carroll. So we know the extent of his sexual creepiness and potential criminal behavior. Now, whether or not that extends to directly involved with Jeffrey Epstein and child abuse, again, we don't know at this point, but, you know, if the shoe fits, I'll say that. Now, we continue. Here we have from Mark Epstein, obviously the brother of Jeffrey Epstein, in an interview on CNN where he said, "I know Donald was in Jeffrey's office back a lot in the 1990s. It documented that Donald flew on Jeff's plane a number of times. I don't know if they ever checked, but I know that Jeff flew on Donald's plane. Also, I don't know if they ever looked at his flight logs." He also goes on in this interview to talk about how they were very close friends to the extent at which Mark Epstein would, be told jokes that Donald Trump had told to Jeffrey Epstein. So they were very, very close friends at the time. We also had Burnett following up and asking that the White House responded to them, saying that the president was never in Epstein's office, and asked, "Is that true?" And Mark Epstein says he was there. The people that worked for Jeffrey in his office, you can find them. They can testify that they saw Trump in Jeffrey's office on numerous occasions. So again, Trump continuing to be caught lying about different connections to Jeffrey Epstein, continuing to downplay his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein, I think for obvious reasons. Now, we also have this here from the BBC in terms of Republicans stepping in to try to protect Donald Trump throughout all of this. They say that the U.S. House Speaker, Mike Johnson, has shut down the chamber to block an Epstein vote. I mean, this is insane, guys. They say the U.S. House of Representatives Speaker Mike Johnson has announced an early adjournment of the chamber, stalling efforts to force the release of documents related to the disgraced financier Jeffrey Epstein. The move delays a politically fraught vote on the matter until September amid growing bipartisan pressure for transparency. It followed a key committee vote to subpoena Ghislaine Maxwell, Epstein's longtime associate, to testify before Congress. Now, we also have this here. Maxwell's legal team told the BBC that they were in discussions with the government, the Trump administration, and that she would always testify truthfully. They say on Capitol Hill on Tuesday, facing mounting pressure from both Democrats and some Republicans to force a vote to release the Epstein-related files within 30 days, Johnson declared a recess a day earlier than had planned. So, in other words, two different things are going on here. Number one, Mike Johnson, it seems clearly on orders from Donald Trump, shut down the House of Representatives early, because Democrats, as well as some Republicans, were looking to work together to force a vote to force the release of the Epstein files. Mike Johnson says, no, we're leaving early. We're shutting down the House of Representatives early to block the release of information on the most notorious child sex trafficker in American history. So that's what Mike Johnson is doing at the behest, you would presume, of Donald Trump. And then the second thing that we have here is this potential for Ghislaine Maxwell to testify before Congress. Now, this is a really interesting situation because, like, if we could get the full story from Maxwell, that's obviously something we would want to get, right? The amount of, skeletons in the closet that she could expose is unimaginable to try to comprehend, right? But at the same time, you have this sort of perverse incentive structure here for Ghislaine Maxwell, who obviously wants to get out of prison, or maybe wants to change her circumstances in regards to her sentence. And so she has every incentive in the world to meet with Donald Trump, to try to, come out to Congress and to avail Donald Trump of any wrongdoing, to say he did nothing wrong, of course, and there's no conspiracy with intelligence agencies, right? She has every incentive in the world for her own well-being to come out and to clear everybody, to say, no, there is no conspiracy here. So it's interesting in that sense as well, right? She's not going to testify before Congress as she's talking to the Trump administration behind the scenes, trying to work a deal out and expose Donald Trump as being a PDF file or something like that. Obviously, that's not going to happen. So I don't actually know, to what extent this would be valuable to have her testify outside of potentially just further trying to cover up what's going on here and sort of giving Trump an easy out so he can say, look, Maxwell herself cleared my name. I mean, these are people who are friends, right? Donald Trump, when Maxwell was being charged with the crimes that she was charged with, he said, I wish her well. I wish her well. What are you talking about? Now, there are also talks behind the scenes. Apparently, things are being floated of even a potential pardon for Maxwell or a commutation of her sentence, which is utterly and completely insane. But that's where we're at. Now, we also have this here from The Independent saying that Trump's under fire Attorney General Pam Bondi has just skipped the human trafficking summit over a quote-unquote medical issue. So there was a CPAC summit that was supposed to happen centered around human trafficking, and Pam Bondi, who's currently helping to cover up the most notorious sexual human trafficker in American history, suddenly comes down with something and can't attend the conference. Okay, do we think that it was a spontaneous medical condition that prevented her from going to this? Or do we think that maybe she didn't want to have to deal with the visuals of her going to a human trafficking conference while she's covering up for the most notorious human trafficker in American history? Which one of these do we think is more likely there? So Pam Bondi skipping out on that conference. Now, we also have the latest on the polling data in terms of how all of this is impacting Donald Trump. Here from Harry Yenton on CNN. His approval rating is significantly down. I mean, back in January, it was +6, trailed down to -3 in March, then -7 in May, and now it's down at -11. So he's definitely trailing down. If you look at the specifics of each individual issue, he's underwater on everything. Still, his best issue is immigration. Then you have economy -14, foreign policy -14, trade -15, and then the Epstein case -37. -37. Now, in terms of how this compares to other, averages of presidents throughout American history, 6 months into their term, the average president is usually +27 on approval rating at this point in their administration. The worst of all time is not Donald Trump 2.0, but Donald Trump 1.0, who was -16 at this point in his first term. So the bottom two presidencies, in terms of the first 6 months of their presidency, of their term, is Donald Trump 1 and Donald Trump number 2. So there you have it, guys. Not a surprise that the Epstein handling is his lowest issue by far, given how we're seeing this handled. I mean, the Trump administration genuinely wants you to believe that this guy, Jeffrey Epstein, who has connections to intelligence agencies, to billionaires, to politicians, to celebrities, to academics, to all of these wealthy, powerful elites, and who was running a massive child trafficking ring, right? Who apparently they have thousands and thousands of videos on, who apparently they have all of this mounting truckload of evidence on, that all of this happened without any criminal culpability from anybody beside Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell themselves. There's no other information that is noteworthy to release to the American people. This is what they're trying to convince you of. I mean, this is one of the most brazen and obvious cover-ups that I've ever seen. And it's not difficult to figure out why this cover-up is happening. It's happening because of this. It's happening because the guy who could release the information, who could release the Epstein files, is he himself in the Epstein files. So there we go. Obviously, we're going to have to keep tracking this. I hope that this story doesn't go anywhere. We got to keep up the pressure on it. But there's your update for today. Absolutely insane.
Politic guy has the best politics. Believe me, no one does it like him. Believe me, everyone is saying